Okay. All right. Well, we're ready for the web. If the web just wants to start it now, I don't know how. Radio just got set up, so maybe it starts soon.
Well, this morning, I went straight to the prosecutor's office. I assumed I just got back to me. Like,
This is his own office. He made the prosecuting announcement at the state police office.
yeah, right. Yeah, that's bad.
It's his own building.
It's kind of dumb, but it's yeah, that room. I don't know.
Or do you want to wait? Okay.
Might as well just try that on Tyler whenever you're ready. All right, we might be starting.
Okay, how we doing? Where do you want us?
Here?
Microphone.
Sorry, sure, good idea.
Awesome.
Still okay? Sitting? Yeah. Okay, we'll move the Meyer water. Little product placement for Meyer.
Always working on your next case.
Well, it would be nice if they sponsored my son's soccer team. There we go. All right. So, why don't we just do this? I don't have a statement prepared. I can start with my reaction to Becker's decision, and then you guys just fire away with any questions you have. Okay. So, obviously, we're very pleased with Christopher Becker's decision today. We appreciate all the time he took to deliberate over the next steps and whether or not to retry. We support his decision. We think it's the right one. And I know that our client, Christopher Schurr, is very pleased with it well. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Was Christopher Schurr watching this as it was being streamed? Was he watching Becker's press conference? And can you talk about his reaction?
We heard from the prosecutor this morning before the press conference. He let us know that he would have in the press conference right around the time the media learned as well. Prior to the press conference, he gave us his decision, so we weren't watching with the rest of it, but just moments before. So he knew before the press conference that what the decision was.
And what about his reaction? I mean, he's pleased, I know, but can you go into more detail?
You want to
about
answer
his
that?
reaction?
Sure. Yeah, I've had the opportunity to talk to Chris Schurr this morning after the decision. And, obviously, a sense of relief, vindication following the trial and now this decision, but certainly not celebration. As far as for the last 3 years, it's never been anything to celebrate from Mr. Schurr or his family. So, but there is a sense of relief here, yes.
No, the mayor put out a statement just a little while ago, talked about sharing the deep sense of frustration and the belief that justice remains unfulfilled. David Grant put that out just a little while ago. Can you respond to that?
Can you read me a statement?
This news is undoubtedly a source of immense pain and disappointment, and our community shares in their sorrow. Many in Grand Rapids will feel a deep sense of frustration and the belief that justice remains unfulfilled. These feelings are valid and must be acknowledged. That's the mayor's statement.
Certainly, we don't dispute that people's feelings should be acknowledged. And in that context, entire statement, I understand the mayor's position. And it's his job to run the city and for all the constituents. So he wanted closure as well. And so I don't refute what he's saying. The process played out. I appreciate Mayor LeGrand's decision not to become involved in making comments during the trial, unlike some other elected officials. So it's his job, because he's the mayor, to look at some of the larger issues that weren't part of this trial. The issues of the way we police in Grand Rapids and in Michigan. That's a legislative issue, an issue for the politicians. So I'm glad that he's involved in those issues. But the trial was actually about Christopher Schurr and conduct that occurred on April 4th, and the jury overwhelmingly voted in favor of acquittal. So that's why I think the prosecutor got this right here, that a retrial wouldn't be good for anybody, because at best it would end up in another hung jury.
Were you surprised by his decision today?
No.
You obviously know this has been a divisive issue. What would you say to people out there right now who might be seeing this, who are upset with the decision?
So we acknowledge that there are greater issues at stake, and that I think that if anybody's upset with this decision, they should refocus their anger or their frustration on maybe trying to make change in a way that they think a change should be made. No one has ever said that we can't adapt the way we police in the state of Michigan to community standards that change over time. But this issue was about whether or not someone was reasonably in fear and was able to allowed to use deadly force in a situation that he didn't want to be in. And so when the juries saw that and heard the actual evidence relating to this case, I think the answer was clear for the vast majority of the jurors.
Now that this chapter is over, what's next for your client?
I don't think you've talked to this one, Jim.
Undecided at this moment. Obviously, it's been a difficult few years here with life on hold in many regards. So it's still going to take some reflection with Mr. Schurr and his family on what might be coming next.
Well, and since the training officers all said he didn't violate training or policy, and he's no longer has these charges hanging over his head, Grand Rapids Police Department, what's to keep him from that?
Well, there was never any decision made by anybody in the internal affairs or whoever reviewed what happened here that Christopher Schurr violated any policy. And so the only reason he was fired in the first place is because of this rule that if you're charged with a felony, you're fired. And so hopefully the city will look at this and determine that you have an officer who complied with his training and now has gone through a trial where it was a hung trial, but it was, as the prosecutor concedes, vastly in favor of acquittal. And, reassess whether or not Christopher Schurr should be able to work for GRPD. But again, as Mr. Becker said, that's a decision for the city of Grand Rapids, not for his defense team.
Would he even want to after all of this?
I think we would have to talk to Chris about that. Certainly for today, he's just happy that Mr. Becker decided not to proceed with another trial.
You talked about the piece of evidence that Lyoya had possession of the taser. Chris Becker put on his witnesses saying they didn't believe that Patrick Lyoya ever had full possession of the taser. There was a struggle over the taser. You guys showed your video showing that Patrick Lyoya had his hand on the taser, had sole possession of the taser. How much does it hurt your client's life to have that belief out there in the community and the prosecutor's belief that Patrick Lyoya really never had the taser in his sole possession?
I don't know that any witness actually testified to that on behalf of the prosecution or the certainly not the defense. I think the testimony from the prosecutor's experts that watched the video is that they didn't know whether or not he was holding it like a gun. So everybody agreed, including from the start of this case to the end. If you go to Judge Ayub's decision in the district court, he said he had exclusive control of the taser. If you go to the Michigan Court of Appeals, they said he had exclusive control of the taser. The prosecutor himself has never disputed that Mr. Lyoya had exclusive control of the taser. And we know that because you see it in his left hand when they're fighting over it, and then it's only in Mr. Lyoya's right hand, just prior to the time the shot was fired. So I do agree or understand what you're asking, and it has been extremely harmful to our client that there's been misinformation in the public about what actually occurred. And especially when you have city officials who are spreading misinformation about what actually happened. The narrative of the story had to be overcome at trial because you had certain officials saying that the basis of the stop, Mr. Lyoya had just was checking his car and something had happened. He was on his way to work, and then he was executed while he lay prone on the ground, as the evidence conclusively showed at trial. And the prosecutor didn't even refute. That wasn't the case. This was a struggle where the officer had to make a split-second decision. So we had to overcome that in the courtroom because prior to the trial, you had plaintiff's attorneys and elected officials saying facts that weren't true. And so that made it very difficult for Christopher Schurr to get a fair trial. So it has harmed him. And we certainly hope, now that there's been a public proceeding where all the actual facts have come out, that it's reported accurately in the press, and that people can see, if they didn't watch the trial themselves, what actually happened.
Were you surprised they were able to get around that video? I mean, the video is hard to watch. It's, the gun to the back of the head.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
Certainly nobody, I don't know who can look at that video and say it's not upsetting. Everybody that sees that, you're not a human being if you're not upset by watching that video. And so, yes, it's hard to get around that. The fact that Mr. Lyoya was regrettably shot in the back of the head, as the evidence showed, it doesn't matter where the shot was made. Even the prosecution agrees with that. It's the decision to use deadly force. And then once an officer decides to use deadly force, the location of the shot is not what the jury was looking at. And I applaud the jury for recognizing that. I didn't see or talk to a single juror afterwards that suggested that was a sticking point or something they had to get over. And so while, there are still photos out there that look really bad, that wasn't the issue for the jury. And thankfully, they didn't focus on something that wasn't relevant.
But that had to be a huge, mountain for you guys to climb. That video that's out there, right? I mean, were you surprised you could overcome that?
Well, that was our job,
Yeah.
Ken. So, I mean, we're dealt the facts that were given, and we argued to the jury based on the law. And the fact is, Officer Schurr made a decision in a split second, and the shot ended up in a place where regrettably ended his life. But he wasn't picking where the shot was going. So it was his decision to use deadly force, and the jury just considered that.
I know you're criminal attorneys. Do you believe Schurr has a civil case against the city for how this has been handled?
You're right, we're criminal attorneys. I don't know. That's going to be left to other attorneys that do that type of work.
He hasn't expressed any thoughts on that. And, I mean, he has civil attorneys, so I assume you speak with.
He's had civil attorneys. Right now, there's a lawsuit pending against him.
Right.
Now, whether he's got claims, that remains to be seen, and we'll let somebody else answer those questions.
So what should this mean to the civil lawsuit against Christopher Schurr?
Again,
I think
I'm not
They
sure.
were counting on, a guilty verdict to help bolster their civil case, obviously.
I don't know that, it's a different standard. I used to do some civil work. So I don't know that the plaintiff attorneys, this case is done because of this decision. But again, you're going to have to ask Ben Johnson or Joe Seward, who's the attorney for Christopher Schurr in the civil case. The case is still pending in federal court. And so that's going to play out just the same way this case played out in the circuit court here.
Has Chris ever spoken to Patrick Lyoya's family? Does he wish to? You said that this was very difficult for him. There's two parties here.
Not that I know of. I don't think they've ever spoke before. If you knew Chris, he would not be opposed to it. Okay? It's one of the other unfortunate aspects of this whole case is nobody really gets to know Chris Schurr and the type of person that he really is. But yeah, Chris would not be opposed to it. And I think overall, just the tone and the temperament amongst the families outside the courtroom for any folks that were there was about as cordial as can be under the circumstances. But no, it's my understanding they have not spoken thus far.
What do you guys say to the Lyoya family after this?
Well, I mean, nobody ever wants to see someone lose a child. And so it's certainly something that it was a tragedy. And I know our client shares this feeling that this was a tragic situation that nobody wanted on that day. He didn't wake up that morning looking to go out and have this happen. And so, condolences for the loss. I mean, it's a tragic situation that regrettably ended up in his death, and there's not really nothing more we can say about that.
Anything else? Covered all.
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you.